Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My esteemed co-host is Laura Blackwell, without whose stalwart collaboration and far superior social skills, I would not be able to sustain bringing you all Story Hour week after week. So shout out to Laura's partnership in this endeavor. I hope you're all healthy and safe, taking care of yourselves, taking care of each other. I started Story Hour about a year and a half ago, right at the dawn of the pandemic, and it was really kind of a small scale exercise in community. I just wanted a place where my writer friends and I could read our stuff to each other and just enjoy it. And it's kind of grown, and it's really turned into something kind of fantastic. The deal with Story Hour is basically we turn to an ancient and time-honored form of entertainment, which is folks sitting around the fire telling each other lies. And so every week, typically, we have two authors, 30 minutes each, doing exactly that. And each week, we offer the authors an opportunity to suggest organizations that if you are in a position to be able to help support, you have the opportunity to do so. But tonight is very special. Tonight, we have a chamber of Laura's, or an exaltation of Laura's. We've got Laura Blackwell, Laura Davy, and Laura Pearlman. And we're very excited to be able to bring you this program. Laura Blackwell is reading tonight for the National Butterfly Center. This is nationalbutterflycenter.org. The NBC, not the network, the National Butterfly Center, is a 100-acre preserve in Mission, Texas, with cultivated gardens, wildscape, navigable through woodland and savanna trails. This landscape is an ongoing work in progress. It was once an onion field in commercial production. This area is now being restored to native habitat to support wildlife. It's very cool. Laura Davy is reading tonight for the ACLU. We all know what they do. ACLU was founded in 1920 and is basically our nation's guardian of liberty. They work in the courts, legislatures, and communities to defend and preserve individual rights and liberties guaranteed to all people in this country by the laws and the Constitution of the United States. This is aclu.org, a truly essential organization, especially now. Always, but especially now. Laura Pearlman is reading tonight for RAICES. That's RAICES, the Refugee and Information Center for Education and Legal Services. At RAICES, they're operating on the national front lines of the fight for immigration rights because they believe that all people have the right to seek a safe and secure future for their families. That's racestexas.org, RAICES, Texas.org. We're going to start our Chamber of Laura's, our exaltation of Laura's tonight with Laura Blackwell. Laura Blackwell is a Pushcart-nominated writer of speculative fiction. Her stories have appeared in magazines and anthologies, including Nightmare, Pseudopod, Strange California, and the 2016 World Fantasy Award-winning She Walks in Shadows. She's copy editor for the Deadlands and was a copy editor at Hugo-nominated publication, the lamented Shimmer. So it's all yours, Laura. Take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, Daniel. You were really far too kind, but we'll let it ride. So I'm reading tonight a story that appeared in Dread Imaginings in June. You can, if you'd like to follow along, I'll drop a link to dreadimaginings.com. It is a story called A Family of Finders. My sister Lucy, or I should say my sister, comma, Lucy, since I have no other living now, sighed and stuck out her jaw. The longer she holds that expression before speaking, the worse the words she's about to drop are going to hurt. I watched her, feeling my throat tighten as she toyed with her rings for a long moment. Maddie, she finally said in a voice laced with artificial sweetness. You are not the only person here who's concerned about the ghosts. Among the many things Lucy has, and the rewards for being a professional matchmaker and love psychic are rich indeed, she's especially got a lot of nerve. Still, I couldn't let it lie. You could at least call them by their names, I told her. We're still family, even if some of us are dead. We were sitting on the hard wooden chairs of our sister Nora's scrupulously clean kitchen, which had been Mama's kitchen before her. Their dim forms worked side by side, but out of sync. Even the spice rack was different for each of them. A careful array of flavors for Mama, a jumble for Nora. Mama's gift was finding the most efficient way to arrange things. It's how we crammed 5 people and all their things into a tiny house in moderate comfort. The oldest and most indistinct of the ghosts, these days Mama rarely did anything more strenuous than sweeping spilled coffee grounds into a pile. After Mama died, Nora, ever the most dutiful of daughters, cared for Papa until he passed too. Papa was good at finding the most he could get from people. He accepted the meals, the rides to doctor appointments, the laundry and cleaning and other housekeeping, but he never forgave Nora for not being Mama. Despite his lack of life skills, he outlived Mama by 4 years. Even now, his misty presence strutted through the living room, making the boards creak and the windows rattle. There's no point to keeping the house. Lucy leaned in as if delivering a confidence. I've always hated this place, and you're hardly home for a week at a time ever. And face it, you could use your share of the money. Lucy and I aren't close, but she knows that I have to travel to help the frightened families and the occasional open-minded police department who are willing to work with the psychic. You know I bill on a sliding scale, I told her. Poor people go missing more often than rich ones. Rich people look for their soulmates as often as poor ones, Lucy said in a mincing, mocking voice. But the rich ones pay a lot better. She rubbed her fingertips together, making her ring's jewels sparkle and their metals gleam. Not just a band of gold and a commanding 2-carat Marquise diamond on her left hand, but a large ruby set in filigree on her right. I pressed my lips tight. Never mind what each of us thinks about how the other uses her finding gifts. The ghosts are still here. Nora died just a month ago. Still fresh enough to hear my words, Nora's ghost looked over her shoulder at me and smiled sadly. And they're fading as ghosts do. Mom's ghost is barely an outline anymore. It's weird now, but soon she'll disappear. In time, all of them will. Lucy tossed sleek hair over one shoulder as she looked around in disdain. Maybe sooner, once we get all the junk out of here. Attachments fade. The ghosts may drive the price down a little. It's a valid concern. But in this neighborhood, it shouldn't be too much. Not enough to justify waiting for them to disappear. The 3 of us had grown up in this house. And despite Mama's gift, it had never been big enough for Lucy, whose ambitions were always for bigger and better. These days, it felt smaller and dowdier with every visit as Mama's clever, cozy arrangements of furniture degraded and the neighborhood gentrified around it. But even a haunted house would sell. And Lucy was right. I could use the money. Papa strutted into the room, cock of the walk as always, but death had softened him. He was a vague present who could barely interact at this point, more pitiful than frustrating. Mama's thin back was a reminder of who we'd lost, even as her material legacy deteriorated. As for Nora, I was grateful that she'd spared Lucy and me the brunt of Papa's caregiving, and sad that she'd given her own health short shrift. I saw families who'd lost people all the time. Even though I wouldn't live with our family ghosts every day, I didn't want to lose them before I had to. Let me have the house for a while. I'll move out of my apartment. After the ghosts are gone, we can sell it. Lucy scoffed. The real estate market's hot now. Come on, Maddie. You don't have anything left here. You and Nora were never close. Nora left her ghostly knife and cutting board behind and stepped toward us, gray and soundless. Not as close as we should have been, I admitted with a twinge. I never even figured out what her gift of finding was. She didn't have one, Lucy said impatiently. Nora was never like the rest of us. Come on, what kind of moron would give up a law practice to take care of a sour old man? She gestured at Papa's ghost, the floorboards creaking under his inaudible footfalls. Nora did love working on immigration cases, I said slowly. Nora's ghost smiled encouragingly, as if I were close to something. Please, Lucy, just for what time they have left. 10 years, maybe less. No. Lucy's voice was flat, all the sweetness gone. I looked at Nora's ghost helplessly. There was no way I could buy out Lucy's share. Nora's ghost held a hand out, and for one stupid second, I thought maybe she was pointing to buried treasure under the floorboards. But she was just reaching out to take Papa's hand. A moment later, she had Mama's hand in her other hand. They glided toward us. They'd never done this before. We hadn't seen Mama's ghost without a transparent kitchen utensil in years. What the hell? Said Lucy. The immigration work. Moving back in when Mama died. Mama's gift of finding was such a subtle thing. A prickle ran down my spine. I think Nora did have a gift of finding. I think maybe she still does. Nora's ghost nodded, and I continued. Nora's gift, Nora's ghost's gift, is finding ways to keep families together. The three ghosts stretched and thinned into wisps, spinning like tornadoes. Lucy yelped as Papa's ghost poured itself into her golden band, dulling its sheen. Mama's clouded her 2-carat diamond. Nora's ghost veered to Lucy's right hand and filled the ruby. Lucy tugged frantically at the rings, but they wouldn't come off. It hurts, she moaned, her face pale and sheened with sweat. Get them out! They're giving you a choice, I told her, bitter satisfaction rising. We're all family. The ghosts are going to stay with one or the other of us. They can stay with me in the house, or they can stay with you wherever you go. Nora's eye looked out of the ruby, waiting for an answer, patient as a stone. Thank you.
Ah, that was lovely. Even the afterlife is ephemeral. As is our custom, we just pause a moment to kind of let the work resonate just a bit. All right, on to Laura number 2, Laura Davy. Laura Davy is reading tonight for the AC. No, I'm sorry. Wrong paragraph. Reset. Laura Davy lives in California with her husband and cat. She wrote her first story when she was in elementary school, and despite the fact that the plot didn't make sense, she kept on writing. That is what I do too, strangely enough. It kind of works in its own strange way. Laura Davy's fiction has been published in Apex, Escape Pod, Grimdark, Grievous Angel, Factor 4, and other places. You can learn more about her at www.lauradavy.com. Take it away, Laura number 2.
Thank you so much for having me here. And great story, Laura. And Laura, I look forward to your story. Just had to do that for the Chamber of Laura's. Today, as I unlock this, I'll be reading the short story, The Food in the Basement. It was published in Apex magazine. Caden mostly fed Sandra frozen meals and salads, though he made a point to buy her favorite snacks and desserts when she was behaving. She had a small kitchen in the basement, and he would restock her food supply about once a week. When he left, she would hide part of the food in case she was punished by only being given bland food again. But no matter what, Sandra always had food, probably because Caden wouldn't get much nutrients when he fed on her if she was starving. Sandra was reading Rabbit at Rest when she heard the locks of the door being released. She glanced at the page number and shut the book. She placed it back in the bookcase so it looked like it had never been removed. She sat back down on the couch and stared at the wall as she heard the last lock unclick. Caden turned and looked at her, then turned back around and set the combination lock. He sat down on the other side of the couch and turned on the TV. They watched in silence while chefs tried to compete to make the best dish using tofu. Caden asked, "Are you hungry? I can order pizza." Sandra just shrugged, and Caden frowned. "Are you still pouting?" Sandra continued to stare at the TV and said, "I was sick for 3 days, and you've been fine for 4 days. I had a one-night stand on Saturday, but I need to drink again. Are you going to be difficult?" Sandra didn't say anything, but held out her wrist. He walked into the kitchen and dampened a paper towel and wiped her wrist, even though it was never dirty. He sat down next to her, and Sandra felt his thigh touch her thigh. He brought his wrist up to his mouth and bit it. She felt his fangs sink in with a sharp pain before the sedative in his saliva dulled any feeling. For the next few months, when he drank, for the first few months, when he drank from her, she wouldn't even remember being bitten, but her body appeared to be building up an immunity. Now, although the pain was dulled and the bite could still heal quickly, she was aware he was drinking her blood. He drank for a few minutes, then pulled back with his mouth still unhinged and touching his chest, revealing his fangs. His fangs were like snake fangs and descended behind what looked like human teeth. They weren't like a mammal's fangs. They were thin and incredibly long. When they weren't in use, they folded into the top of the soft palate of his mouth. Once Caden had showed her that he didn't swallow the blood. When he fed, he raised his tongue to block his throat. An opening below his tongue collected the blood. What happened after that, Caden didn't say. His dirty blonde hair was disheveled and fell over his blue eyes that were practically gray. He looked like a grotesque parody of a human when he fed. Yet, when his fangs were retracted, he looked normal, though there was more pronounced blue veins and thicker fingers. Most people would think he was handsome. Caden wiped the extra blood from Sandra's wrist with a paper towel. The wound was already coagulating. He went back upstairs for an hour. When he came back, he brought down a sausage and pepperoni pizza. They watched District 13 and reruns of I Love Lucy until Sandra fell asleep on the couch. Caden carried her into this bedroom and tucked her into his bed. He left, locking up the soundproof basement apartment so Sandra couldn't escape. It had been 169 days since Sandra was kidnapped. Sandra woke up in the middle of the night and put on her pajamas and brushed her teeth. She stared at her tangled hair in the mirror, but didn't bother to brush it. Out of habit, she checked the door to see if Caden had accidentally left it unlocked and felt the familiar pang of disappointment. Then she went back to sleep and dreamed of walking down a never-ending corridor of a shopping mall. Sandra slept for 10 hours and then forced herself to use the treadmill for an hour before she showered. She ate toast with honey and took out one of her notebooks, wrote down what she did for every birthday, including her 17th when Caden had brought her a chocolate cake, and she had cried the entire day. After 3 months of fighting, followed by 2 months of trying to forget everything that had happened before, she realized she had forgotten the color of her dad's eyes and couldn't remember the date of her best friend's birthday. Since then, she had asked for notebooks and had written on hours of end everything from her past, unsure if the information could have put her family at peril, but also unsure if she could stay sane if she couldn't look up facts in her notebook to reassure herself that her memory was correct and her mom's perfume smelled like gardenias. Sandra watched TV and read the rest of the day until she grew drowsy and fell asleep on the couch. She woke up from her nap with Caden studying her bookshelf. Without turning around, he asked, "Do you require anything?" She didn't bother to respond. She couldn't say freedom. It was an old argument, and bringing it up again wouldn't accomplish anything. He stroked her hair and left without feeding on her. The next day, he arrived in the morning with a fresh bottle of orange juice and a new video game. Caden played the video game while Sandra watched. He had faster reactions than a normal human, but sometimes his actions didn't make sense. During the game, when the enemy was shooting at him, his character just stood there and then attacked a member of his own team for firing on the enemy. He didn't even laugh or smile when he did this. It almost appeared calculated, except there didn't seem to be any benefit in the game. He fed on her neck, his hand cradling her cheek as she stared at the spider crawling across the ceiling. A week later, he handed Sandra a large cage with what looked like a fat gray squirrel that had a wide face with large ears and a short tail. It was shivering in the corner of the cage behind his exercise wheel. Sandra smiled and stuck her index finger through the bar to pet it. Caden stood back and watched. "It's a chinchilla." She asked, "Are you going to feed on him too?" "No." She opened the cage door, but the chinchilla stayed in the corner, shivering. She spoke softly, asking a question that she had already asked dozens of times. Each time, Caden hadn't said anything. "Why didn't you just get a bunch of animals to feed on?" We take on the aspects of what we drink, like a sea slug that gets algae and then can perform photosynthesis. When we drink from humans, we look human. If I drink from a dog, I would take on those characteristics. Sandra didn't move. She was frightened that if she said or did anything, he would stop talking. At the beginning, she used to always ask questions, hoping that the more she knew, the better her chances of escape would be. She no longer thought that, but she was curious. Caden continued, "Whenever humans kill us, it's because we stopped feeding on them and began to look like monsters. You killed the ones who took pity on you." He stopped talking, and Sandra was silent for a few minutes before asking, "Who taught you this? Did someone make you like this?" He ignored her and poured himself a glass of orange juice. He sat down and watched TV while Sandra fussed over her pet. "I need to feed," Caden said. Sandra pulled down her pants and lay down on the couch. He crouched down, cleaning her thigh, and drank from it. He rotated what part of the body he drank from, but this was better than when he drank from her neck. He got up to go, and Sandra asked, "Are you going to turn me into a vampire? Could you turn that chinchilla into a human?" Sandra pulled her pants back up and picked up the chinchilla and placed it on the floor. It immediately ran under the table, and Sandra spent the rest of the evening trying to coax it out with treats. The plastic table was a replacement table for an oak table that once stood in the same place. On the 10th day after she was kidnapped, she had broken the table and used a jagged leg like a stake. She stood by the doorway, and when he entered, she had stabbed him in the arm, though she was aiming for his chest. He picked her up with one hand and pulled the makeshift weapon out and stabbed her in the same spot. She almost bled to death, and he fed on the wound while she cried out in pain. Now all the heavy furniture was gone, and she didn't bother to ask for cooking knives. When Sandra thought about that attack, she didn't remember the scar he gave her or the fact that he waited 3 days before he fed again. She remembered that he had bled when she had stabbed him, and the wound didn't magically heal as soon as she took the stake out of his arm. She made herself instant mac and cheese in the microwave and ate watching Animal Planet on TV. After an hour's silence, the chinchilla left its hiding spot and explored the living room. Sandra resisted the urge to pounce on it and pick it up and pet it until she fell asleep. Instead, she watched it twitch its little nose. The next morning, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her black hair was dull and her skin was pale. It wasn't her, at least how she remembered herself. She didn't bother to get out of her pajamas and spent the whole day watching her new pet. Sandra woke up early the next day and jogged on the treadmill for an hour before writing one line in her notebook. He noticed that I was lonely. She read the rest of the day, and then Chinchilla even slept next to her on the couch. At 4 a.m. on Sunday, Cadron came down to feed on her, wearing what she called her hunting gear. A nice button-up shirt with the top 3 buttons undone, and black slacks with his hair styled into spikes. She often thought of trying to seduce him, then attacking him while he was distracted, but she felt sick each time she thought of kissing him, kissing those lips. Besides, she wasn't sure if he was actually attracted to humans or if he only went to bars and nightclubs to feed on a woman after sex. They would believe they blocked out from alcohol or just fell asleep, never knowing that they had sex with something that wasn't human. Sandra named her chinchilla Whiskers and finished her book. A few days later, she stared at the bathroom mirror again, then grabbed her completed book and hit the mirror until it broke. She stared at herself in the reflection. It was as if she was trapped behind a spider web. She snarled and smashed the mirror until shards fell onto the ground. 3 hours later, Caden came downstairs, and they watched Mean Streaks and ate Chinese food. After the movie, she handed him her wrist. He didn't react, even though this is the first time she was volunteering to be bitten. Instead, he just went through the ritual of getting a wet towel to clean it off. When he bit into her wrist, his eyes focused on her arms. She dug into the cushions of the couch with her other hand and pulled out a large, sharp mirror shard. She had a paper towel wrapped around it so she wouldn't be cut, but she held it so tightly it sliced her palm. She plunged it into the back of his neck, and he reared back and crushed the hand he was holding. She heard her bones break, but she didn't cry out. She dragged the mirror shard across the back of his neck. He jumped up, but she managed to hold onto the shard, and he moved away from her. It almost seemed like a red fountain had erupted from his neck. He was faster than her, but she followed him. He reached out and pulled on the wounded arm, and she felt her wrist break and her arm pop out of place. He started to reach for her neck, and she stabbed him in the stomach before jumping out of reach. His fangs were still out, and he hissed at her as he tried to strike her neck, but she stabbed him again, and he collapsed onto the ground. He put his hands over one of his stomach wounds, but the back of his neck was still bleeding heavily. She backed away and realized she was covered in blood and her arm was dislocated, but she didn't feel any pain, instead just dull throbbing. She sat back down on the couch and stared at him. He laughed. "You killed me. I wasn't sure if you could die." "Of course I can die." Sandra didn't say anything and touched her broken hand and wrist. She watched as he slumped over as his neck still spurted blood. She asked, "Would you have killed me?" "Yes. When I had to move, or you got too sick, or you attacked me too often. I should have killed you when I saw you were still conscious when I was feeding." He coughed up blood. "But you don't know the combination to leave." "I have time to try every combination. If I ration my food, I have enough for a month. It could take you over a month." She shrugged. "It's 3-17-9-2. He coughed again, and blood splattered across his already blood-stained shirt. "If you tell anyone about me, they'll kill you." She didn't have to ask who they were. She frowned and asked, Why did you tell me the combination? He didn't say anything. She nodded and stood up and walked over to him. Her left arm was useless now, but she carried the bloodied charade in her other hand. She stood looking down at him. His dirty blonde hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes seemed to unfocus. He was already sitting in a pool of blood. She slit his throat and stood over him for several minutes to make sure he stayed dead. Then she put Whiskers in the cage and left the basement. The end.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. That was great. Really enjoyed that. Again, we pause, we reflect, we let it sink in and resonate. All right. Our final installment, The Chamber of Laura's, is Laura Pearlman. Her fiction has appeared in Nature, Shimmer, Flash Fiction Online, and a handful of other places. Her LL Cat captions have appeared on McSweeney's. She's a former associate editor at Escape Pod and editor of the entirely hypothetical Cat's Cast podcast. You can find her online at Laura's Bad Ideas on Twitter. Take it away, Laura Pearlman.
Okay, those are great stories, Laura and Laura. So this is called Some Things I Probably Should Have Mentioned Earlier, and it was originally published in Mothership Beta. Dear Kevin, I'm sorry I waited so long to tell you this, but I really hate your vacation cabin. Everything about it creeps me out. The sound of crickets at night makes my skin crawl. They sound like impending doom, like a critical piece of equipment being worn down by friction, or 1,000 tiny voices, hoarse from screaming, reduced to a raspy warning chant in some ancient language. The crickets aren't the only problem. The smell of so much wood in one place makes my eyes burn. And is it really necessary to throw pine cones into the fireplace? Are the burnt wood fumes not overpowering enough? I used to lie awake at night, fantasizing about finding whoever came up with that idea, grinding them up, feeding them to the crickets, and then gathering up the crickets, stuffing them into the fireplace, burning the cabin down, and watching from a safe distance. Upwind, of course. Do crickets even eat meat? You probably know. You grew up with all this. That's why you're comfortable with it. I'm not. To me, it's alien and disturbing. I wish I'd told you this the first time you took me there, right after we started dating. But your friends were having such a good time. I wanted to be the fun girlfriend who liked what everyone else liked. It must seem strange that I'm bringing this up now when neither of us will ever go back there. I mention it because saying I loved your cabin set off the chain of events that led us to where we are today. It wasn't the first lie I told you, of course, but the others were just my cover story. I wish I'd been honest with you then. I wish I'd had the courage to tell you who and what I am. I wish I'd shown you images of the different shapes I'd taken before committing myself to human form. I wish I'd been able to make you feel the joy and freedom that comes with flowing from one shape to another, and the profound sense of loss I felt when I gave that up. I wish I'd been able to share what life was like on the ship. It was a total immersive experience. We spoke human languages, ate human food, and molded ourselves into closer and closer approximations of human shapes, with human form instructors as our guides. We read your literature, tapped into your networks, and watched your videos. We received our cover stories and fashioned our human personalities. One of the hardest things to master was food preferences. They're just so arbitrary. Remember that time your sister came over for dinner and we made chocolate fondue for dessert? We started with apple slices, orange sections, and strawberries. Then Janice wanted to try something salty, so I brought out the saltiest fruit we had, a jar of olives. Oops. I seem to mess up a lot during meals with your family. I'm sorry I laughed at your uncle at that first Thanksgiving dinner. I know you wanted me to ignore him, but information gathering is my job. I just couldn't keep a straight face. If he only knew, my people are far more illegal and far more alien than anyone he was ranting about. And believe me, we're not here to steal anyone's jobs. I won't go so far as to say I should have told you our plan, not our complete plan. But the research phase is scheduled to continue for another 73 years. We're nothing if not methodical. And I could have just said we were here to learn more about you. I should have told you at least that much when I found out I was pregnant. I honestly hadn't believed that was possible. And then I remembered something I'd read during the journey to this planet. The ship was stocked with most of your classic literature, including a story about a husband and wife who exchanged gifts. He sold his watch to buy her a hair accessory. She sold her hair to buy him a watch accessory. Supposed to convey irony, I think. For a long time after I read it, I thought human hair stopped growing at adulthood. Otherwise, the story lacks symmetry. The husband is permanently deprived of his watch, but the wife's hair will grow back with no effort on her part. I thought perhaps you and I were like the characters in that story. Maybe this wasn't an interspecies pregnancy after all. I'd spent the last 4.5 years deceiving my apparently human spouse into thinking I was human. Maybe you'd been doing the same. The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that this was true. I began to make preparations for the traditional Strelerian pregnancy announcement ritual, pared down for just the two of us. I planned a feast of guinea pigs and salamanders, the closest things I could find to our traditional delicacies. I thought we'd break the rules just this once and gorge ourselves on live meat. At the same time, just as a formality really, I collected hair and skin samples while you slept and took them in for analysis. I repeated the test 3 times and the results were devastating. You were totally and undeniably human. Dr. Tron says we were able to produce that tiny zygote because my human cell mimicry was so accurate, and it was able to survive because human stem cells are almost as malleable as our own. I should have told you all this gradually throughout the course of the pregnancy. I had many opportunities to do so. When you asked why I wouldn't even consider your sister as obstetrician, I could have told you everything and explained that Dr. Tron was the only Strelerian physician in the area. But what if you didn't believe me? I convinced myself at the time that it would be better to wait for the ultrasound. We'd watch it together and you'd see the baby stretch and contract and reshape itself. As the day of the ultrasound approached, I became more and more preoccupied with my own fears. What if there was a human fetus inside me with one of those enormous human baby heads? I've seen how you people give birth. I began having nightmares about one of those things bursting out of me. I was awash in a sea of fear and regret. That's why I forgot to tell you I'd rescheduled the appointment. I can't begin to tell you how relieved I was to see the images of our perfect little angel flowing into an ovoid, an almost cube, and an adorably lopsided dodecahedron before returning to her resting spherical form. I'm sorry things were so tense when my relatives arrived right before my due date. They've never approved of this marriage. My parents hated the idea of a human raising their grandchild. 3 of them wanted to kill you outright. The others just wanted me to leave you. The only thing they agreed about was how irresponsible I'd been. Getting pregnant, getting married, even the way I'd made decisions back on the ship. To be fair, they were right about that last bit. I don't know, you pick one for me is probably the worst possible answer you can give when asked to pick a gender. Eventually, they reached a compromise. They concocted an elaborate plan for me to fake my own death, leave the country, and raise our baby alone. They arranged everything: new passport, plane ticket, apartment, even a new wardrobe, and wrote a new cover story for me. I refused to go along with it. I was sure our love was strong enough to withstand this challenge. Half of our marriages end in divorce, and I was determined that ours wouldn't be one of them. I should have planned a better distraction for you when I confronted my family. Leaving you alone with my parent adjunct, Uncle Roger, was a mistake. He's not as bad as your uncle, but he does love to talk, and he tends to forget some of your more nonsensical cultural taboos. I should have warned him not to tell his war stories, and especially not the parts about feasting on his fallen enemies. Seriously, what's wrong with that? It's not like they'd be any less dead if we left their bodies to rot. And as I tried to explain, we maintain proper hygiene, eating only healthy people we've slain in battle, not anyone who's died from disease. Arguing with you about that was a mistake. That's valuable time I could have spent telling you my background and what to expect with the baby. And then I went into labor, and it was too late to say much of anything at all. Still, I was sure you'd come around once our baby was born. A powerful love for our offspring is something our two species have in common. I didn't expect you to freak out at the sight of a few baby teeth. Yes, they appear within minutes of birth instead of however long it takes for your kind. And yes, they're longer and pointier and more numerous than you're accustomed to. But that's a perfectly natural phase of infant development. For the next couple of weeks, she'll be flopping around, all teeth and digestive tract, eating everything in sight to support her neonatal growth spurt. She's so adorable and clever. It looks like she's developing venom sacs. Only about 15% of Silurian babies have that instinct. Her grandparents are very impressed. Goodbye, Kevin. I can see now that you'll never be the kind of parent our child deserves. I'm putting this into a letter instead of speaking to you in person because I don't want to subject our baby, or let's face it, myself, to the escalating anger and, frankly, xenophobia you've displayed ever since my parents showed up. I'm sorry it's come to this. I'm sure you understand why we can't let you go. I know the basement can get a little chilly, but you shouldn't be there much longer. I hope you'll find some comfort in the knowledge that although you won't be around to help raise our child, you won't have failed her completely. You won't nurture her, but you will nourish her. Tonight, when her teeth have completely hardened, you'll have the honor of being her first solid meal. All, well, some of my love, Lissa.
Thank you so much, Laura Pearlman. As is our wont, we pause a moment, we reflect, let it sink in. All right. So an interesting format. Three wonderful authors, wonderful stories. If there's any three authors with common names out there that would like to put together a program for us here at Story Hour, please shout out to me and Laura Blackwell, and we'll figure something out. But thank you, Laura Blackwell, Laura Davy, and Laura Pearlman, for wonderful stories and for giving us another installment of Story Hour. And thank you all out there for joining us again this week. Please come back next week. We will have another great program, CSE Cooney and Carlos Hernandez. So until then, stay safe, take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and have a great week. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks, Daniel.